She walked through those glass doors like she owned the place. No badge swipe, no security escort, just striding in wearing bright white sneakers and some trendy blazer that screamed social media influencer. Everyone else had to go through the front desk checkpoint, not her. Instead, CEO Patricia Caldwell herself was there waiting, all smiles and handshakes like she'd just discovered the next Steve Jobs. I'm Calvin Hartwell, by the way. 47 years old, been building systems at Summit Logistics for 19 years. Started here right after the dot-com crash when everyone thought the internet was dead. Turns out the real crash would come from nepotism, not code. I stood by the elevator bank with my coffee getting cold, watching this girl who couldn't be older than 25 glide past security like she had diplomatic immunity. She didn't even look around until Patricia steered her my way. Then she turned, tilted her head, and smiled. "You must be Calvin," she said, sweet as pie. "You're the one I'm replacing, right?" My mouth went dry. Not from fear exactly, more like that gut feeling you get when a server starts throwing errors but hasn't crashed yet. Just warning signs flashing in your head. The same feeling I'd had last month when my wife Jennifer asked if I'd heard anything about layoffs. Nothing concrete, I'd told her, but the new MBA hires have been asking a lot of questions about legacy systems. "I don't think we've met," I managed, "and I haven't heard anything about transitions." She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything yet. I'm just shadowing Aunt Patricia for now." Aunt Patricia? Of course. That explained everything and nothing at the same time. Jennifer's words echoed in my head from our conversation over breakfast. "At 47, Cal, you're not old, but you're not young in tech years. Companies love to say fresh perspective when they mean cheaper salary." The girl winked and followed the CEO into the elevator without looking back. The doors closed with that soft ding, and everything went quiet again. But something had shifted inside me. Like when you know a system failure is coming but you can't quite pin down where. That familiar dread that used to wake me up during the Y2K preparation days when everyone thought computers would destroy civilization at midnight. The worst part? Nobody else seemed to notice. Not the receptionist, not the junior developers, not even our VP of engineering who walked right past them without batting an eye. I stood there another minute, coffee cooling in my hand, my badge suddenly feeling heavier around my neck. The same badge I'd worn through 3 company acquisitions, 2 major system overhauls, and countless late nights fixing other people's mistakes. Something was happening, and it had already started without me. Jennifer had been right to worry. The mortgage on our Denver house wasn't going anywhere, and with Tommy starting college next year, this wasn't the time for career uncertainty. But in tech, uncertainty was the only constant. I'd learned that lesson watching colleagues disappear during the 2008 recession, then again during various digital transformations that were really just cost-cutting measures dressed up in buzzwords. That night I sat at our kitchen table, Jennifer across from me grading papers. She taught high school math, steady income, steady schedule, steady everything. The opposite of my world where disruption was celebrated and experience was often seen as baggage. "How was work?" she asked without looking up from her red pen. "Interesting," I said, then told her about the girl, about the replacement comment, about Aunt Patricia. Jennifer set down her pen. "Nepotism hire? Looks that way. And she said she's replacing you? Could be a misunderstanding, could be wishful thinking on her part, but Jennifer knew me too well. Cal, you've got that look, the same one you had when they brought in that consulting firm 2 years ago." She was right. The consulting firm had recommended modernizing leadership structures and leveraging digital native perspectives. Translation: older employees were expensive and outdated. Half the senior staff was gone within 6 months, replaced by people who could code React but had never lived through a real system failure. "Maybe it's time to update the resume," I said. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You built that place, Cal. That supply chain system handles what, 40% of their business? Closer to 60%. But building something and owning it are different things." "What do you mean?" I'd never told her about the IP contract from 2020. How Summit's legal team had tried to get me to sign over all rights to my architectural work. How I'd refused because their terms were too broad, would let them patent my innovations under company ownership even for non-Summit projects. How they'd said it was standard, everyone signed. How I'd replied that I wasn't everyone, Nothing, I said. Just tech industry politics. But that night, lying in bed listening to Jennifer's steady breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The girl's confident smile, Patricia's obvious favoritism, the way she'd known my name before we'd met. This wasn't random. This was planned. I thought about our emergency fund, 3 months of expenses, maybe 4 if we cut back. Tommy's college applications were already submitted, deposits paid. Jennifer's teacher salary was steady but modest. At 47, with 19 years of experience, I should have been hitting my peak earning years. Instead, I felt like I was standing on shifting ground, watching younger employees get promoted while experienced became corporate code for expensive. The next morning, I got to the office early like always. The parking lot was nearly empty, just security and the overseas team finishing their shift. This was my favorite time. Quiet servers humming in the distance, no meetings, no politics, just pure problem solving. I'd fixed more critical issues before 8 a.m. than most people handled all day. But today felt different. Today felt like the beginning of an ending I hadn't asked for. I didn't even finish my morning coffee before my computer chimed. Meeting request, immediate. No subject line, no details, just a timestamp and location. Executive Conference Room B. That room was reserved for board meetings and terminations. In 19 years, I'd only been in there twice. Once for my promotion to senior architect, once when they laid off the entire QA department. The walk down that hallway felt longer than usual. Each step echoed off the polished floors, past motivational posters about innovation and teamwork that suddenly felt like mockery. I thought about Jennifer's packed lunch sitting in my desk drawer, the thermos of coffee she'd made me that morning, the way she'd kissed my forehead and said, "Have a good day, honey," like it was any other Tuesday. The door was cracked when I arrived. Patricia sat at the head of the polished table, hands folded, staring at the wood grain like it might start talking. Next to her was Dana from HR, wearing that neutral expression that only meant one thing. And there was Sophia, sitting in the CTO's usual chair with a tablet glowing in her lap, looking like she already belonged. "Calvin," Patricia began, voice carefully rehearsed, "you've been with us a long time, longer than most people stay in this industry." I nodded, unsure if that was a compliment or a death sentence. In tech, longevity could be seen as dedication or inability to adapt. At 47, I'd watched enough culture shifts to know which way this was heading. But companies evolve, technology changes, leadership needs to reflect the future we're building. The silence that followed could have choked a horse. I glanced at Sophia, who was typing something on her tablet with the focused intensity of someone live tweeting their victory. It's time we embrace new energy. Sophia will lead that transition. My brain didn't process it at first. I looked at Patricia, then Dana, then Sophia, who gave me this tight little smile like she'd just won a prize she didn't know how to unwrap. The phrase "new energy" rang in my ears, not fresh perspective or different approach. New energy, as if my 19 years of debugging their disasters and preventing their failures had somehow drained the company's batteries. "This is a restructuring?" I asked. Dana leaned forward with practiced sympathy. "This isn't about performance, Calvin. It's about realigning with our evolving brand vision. Corporate speak for 'you're fired, but we're too cowardly to say it.'" I'd heard variations of this speech before, delivered to colleagues who'd suddenly become redundant or misaligned with company objectives. It was the same script, just with my name plugged in. Patricia slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared a generous exit package." The folder felt heavy when I opened it. Termination agreement, severance terms that looked reasonable on paper but wouldn't cover Tommy's tuition. And there at the bottom, 3 signatures. Mine was missing, but the third name made my stomach drop. Anthony Walsh. Tony. My closest ally in the IT department. The guy I'd mentored for 12 years through every crisis, every late-night emergency, every system migration. He'd signed off on removing me. The ink was barely dry, but his signature was there in blue ballpoint, neat and decisive. No hesitation marks, no signs of reluctance. Just his name, approving my termination like it was any other purchase order. "Can I say goodbye to my team?" I managed to ask. "Of course," Dana said with that fake smile. "But we'd appreciate discretion." Discretion. Like 19 years of my life could be swept under the rug without making anyone uncomfortable. Like the hundreds of late nights I'd spent fixing their mistakes, the weekends I'd sacrificed to keep their systems running, the innovations I'd built that became their competitive advantage. All of it could be handled with discretion. I closed the folder and stood up slowly. How long do I have? End of business today, Patricia said. Security will escort you out at 5 p.m. Security escort. Like I was a criminal instead of the guy who'd kept their infrastructure from collapsing during 3 major system failures. The same infrastructure Sophia was apparently inheriting, along with my access codes, my documentation, my architectural decisions that had taken years to implement and perfect. Walking back to my office felt surreal. The hallways that had been my second home for nearly 2 decades suddenly felt foreign, like I was trespassing in someone else's building. Colleagues I'd worked with for years avoided eye contact, suddenly finding their phones or paperwork fascinating. Word traveled fast in our industry, and everyone knew the score. I started packing in silence. My office felt smaller than usual, like it was already shrinking to accommodate my absence. The coffee mug with Systems Guru printed on it, the photo of Jennifer and Tommy from last year's company picnic, the little cactus that somehow survived every office move and late-night coding session, all of it stamped with an expiration date I hadn't seen coming. People walked past my open door, but nobody stopped, not even to say sorry or good luck. The hallway went quiet, like the whole building knew what was happening and nobody wanted to get too close. Maybe they were afraid termination was contagious, that acknowledging my situation would somehow put their own jobs at risk. I was stuffing the last of my notebooks into a cardboard box when Tony appeared in my doorway. He hesitated, then stepped halfway in, looking everywhere except at me. His face had that pale, guilty look of someone who'd just hit a dog with their car. Cal, he started, then stopped. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. If he wanted absolution, he'd have to earn it with honesty, not half-hearted apologies. I didn't know how else to handle it, he finally said. You signed it, Tony. You had a choice. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. They told me it was either go along or risk the whole department getting restructured. Said my name was next on the list. I've got twins starting college next year, and Sarah's been out of work since her company downsized. The same financial pressures I faced, the same middle-aged vulnerability in an industry that worshipped youth. But that didn't excuse betrayal. You used to have principles too, I said quietly. He winced like I'd slapped him. I'm sorry, Cal. I really am. The apology hung in the air between us, sincere but useless. Sorry didn't pay my mortgage or fund Tommy's education. Sorry didn't erase his signature from my termination papers. When did they revoke my admin access? I asked. He froze. What? I checked the logs yesterday. My credentials were stripped 5 days ago. His voice barely reached me. They said they had to move fast, that you already knew about the transition. I didn't. I thought yesterday's meeting was the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one that was already decided. 5 days. They'd been planning this while I was still showing up early, fixing their bugs, keeping their $850 million supply chain system from crashing. While Jennifer and I were discussing Tommy's college applications over dinner, assuming we had job security, I picked up my badge from the desk. Calvin Hartwell, Senior Systems Architect. The magnetic strip caught the fluorescent light one last time before I set it down next to my empty coffee mug. Tony turned to leave, shoulders hunched with guilt. Tony, I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. When you're explaining this to your twins, make sure you tell them how easy it was. The walk to my car felt like a funeral march. The cardboard box felt heavier with each step, not because of its contents, but because of what it represented. Jennifer would be getting home from school in an hour, expecting to hear about my day, maybe planning dinner around my usual 6 p.m. arrival. Instead, I'd be walking through our front door at 2:30 p.m. with a box of personal items and news that would reshape our entire financial future. The drive home gave me time to think, and thinking led me to remember something important. That night, sitting in my home office with my personal laptop, the one that never touched Summit's network, I started digging through old emails. I typed intellectual property transfer 2020 and hit enter. There it was, like a gift from my past self. An email thread from Summit's legal team asking me to sign a document transferring full rights of my architectural work to company ownership. I'd refused, not out of spite, but principle. Their wording was too broad, would let them sell or license the system without my consent, even for projects unrelated to Summit's core business. I'd told them I wasn't signing until they revised it to reflect collaborative ownership. They'd said it was standard, that everyone signed. I'd replied that I wasn't everyone. The thread ended with my response. Until revisions are made to reflect reasonable scope, I cannot sign this document. They never replied. More importantly, they never followed up. In the chaos of deadlines and product launches, they'd forgotten. Or assumed I'd caved eventually. But I never did. And now I had proof. I scrolled down to the attached contract. The PDF was still there, unsigned. The signature field under my name was blank, untouched after all these years. That's when I remembered something else. I searched for IP clarification meeting notes and found it. A summary from Summit's internal counsel dated October 18, 2020. Due to the nature of Calvin Hartwell's independent development prior to formal integration with company systems, explicit signature is required to enforce IP transfer. Without it, legal ownership may be contestable. There it was, in writing from their own legal team. My system, the foundation of Summit's predictive logistics platform, their vendor optimization algorithms, their whole competitive advantage, wasn't theirs. Not legally. They'd forgotten to get the one thing they needed. My signature. Jennifer found me there an hour later, still staring at the screen. "Cal? You're home early." I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her set down her teacher bag and sit in the chair beside me. "They let me go," I said simply. Her face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, worry, then determination. Severance? 6 months, plus benefits continuation. College fund? We'll be tight, but Tommy can still go to state school. Might need to take out loans for the difference. She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "What about the system you built? Can't you take that knowledge somewhere else?" I showed her the emails, explained the unsigned contract, the legal gray area I'd unknowingly created. It's more complicated than that. But yes, technically, what I built doesn't fully belong to them. So what happens now? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Calvin Hartwell?" Professional voice, crisp accent. Speaking. "This is Charles Preston, CEO of Alpine Technologies. Word gets around fast in our industry. We heard about the transition at Summit. Alpine Tech. Summit's biggest competitor, the company we'd crushed in last year's trans-global logistics contract bid. The same company that had been trying to poach our senior engineers for months. We've also heard about recent system instabilities," he continued. "Frankly, Calvin, we'd rather not reinvent the wheel. We're interested in what you built, more specifically, what you could build next." I looked at Jennifer, who was listening intently. Her teacher's instincts had kicked in. She could sense this was important. "I'm authorized to offer full architectural control, clean budget, no red tape, and equity participation if you're willing to lead our infrastructure division." This wasn't just a job offer. It was an invitation to rebuild on my terms, with Summit's biggest rival funding the effort, with my family's financial future secured by someone who actually valued experience over youth. "I'd like to discuss this further," I said finally. "Naturally. We'll fly you out first class tomorrow if you're available." After hanging up, Jennifer squeezed my hand. That sounded promising. It did. But there's something else I need to do first. I turned back to the laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. 3 years ago, during a chaotic migration, I'd created a test environment, a sandbox mirror of Summit's core architecture, hidden, forgotten by everyone except me. Time to see if they'd been taking care of my baby while I was gone. I've always believed code tells the truth when people lie. That belief guided me through 19 years of debugging crises and pulling all-nighters to keep systems running. People panic, people mislead, but code shows you exactly what's happening if you know where to look. 3 years ago, during a chaotic migration, I'd created a test environment, a sandbox mirror of Summit's core architecture for simulations and stress testing. I'd registered it under a dummy account, K47 Ghost, to avoid unnecessary bottlenecks, spun it up late one night while waiting for a vendor patch. It had no permissions to push live changes, but full visibility into everything happening inside the infrastructure. Best of all, it wasn't connected to the main admin registry. Nobody from HR, nobody from executive leadership, not even Tony knew it existed. I logged in, the dashboard lit up like I'd never left, and there she was. Sophia had gone live. Not just using the system I'd built, she was inside the original architecture, directly manipulating base layers of code, touching things that should have been locked down, tweaking scripts she clearly didn't understand. No version control, no backup staging, no audit logs enabled. She was rebuilding a Formula One engine with a socket wrench. I clicked through the branches and found something that made my stomach drop. She'd renamed multiple core files to match her own convention. Worse, she'd removed several integrity checks from the distribution algorithm, probably thinking they were legacy bloat. They weren't. Those checks prevented cascading failures when vendor load times conflicted. Without them, the platform was vulnerable to real-time supply chain distortion. She was playing with a nuclear reactor and treating it like a microwave. But here's the thing. I could have shut it down right then. One command. Instead, I navigated to a dormant kernel module I'd installed years ago as a failsafe, designed to detect unauthorized privilege escalations and trigger lockout if it sensed tampering. Now I updated it, rewrote the condition logic. If admin account C Hartwell is removed or disabled, trigger cascade lock protocol. Cascade lock didn't delete anything. It rendered the entire system non-functional, a soft kill. Every process would stall indefinitely. Data would remain intact but unreadable, untouchable, unusable until reversed by biometric confirmation. And I was the only one who could unlock it. I typed it all manually. No automated scripts, no audit trails. Encrypted the change, embedded it under 6 layers of decoy comments, then exited. Before logging out, I screenshotted Sophia's activity logs, timestamps of her changes, her user ID, her file paths. If anything went wrong, she'd be the last user on record, not me. I named the file inheritance.pdf because that's what she'd called it, right? A foundation she was inheriting. The next morning, Jennifer kissed me goodbye as I headed to the airport. "Knock 'em dead in Seattle," she said. "Show them what 19 years of experience looks like." Charles Preston met me at the gate himself. Late 40s, sharp suit, old school manners. His CTO, Raymond Torres, was waiting in the car. Quiet guy with keen eyes and a reputation for respecting experience over trends. By 4 p.m., I was in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Seattle skyline, walking them through the structure I'd built for Summit and the improved version I intended to create. By 6 p.m., a private server cluster was provisioned, clean, and waiting. But rebuilding isn't just about writing new code. It's about clearing the debris left behind. Back at my hotel, I pulled up a browser and searched Next-Gen Core, the name Sophia had slapped on my system. The results made my blood pressure spike. Her LinkedIn post, press releases, even a tech blog calling her the visionary behind NextGen's revolutionary approach. Then I checked the U.S. Copyright Office database. Filed March 8th, owner Sophia Caldwell. Platform NextGen Core. Filed under original software architecture. She hadn't just rebranded my system. She'd filed it under her name as if she'd created it. Used nearly identical descriptors from a white paper I'd written in 2019. This wasn't ignorance. This was theft. I opened the Copyright Office's infringement portal. Anonymous submission. Attached the white paper, development logs, metadata files, screenshots from my Ghost account. Added a timeline explaining the missing IP transfer and duplication of original logic. Hit submit. Let the system handle it. At 2:15 p.m. the next day, sitting in Alpine's secure development lab, I opened my laptop one final time. Remote terminal. Authenticated to my Ghost node, one of the last bridges between my original system and what Summit believed they controlled. I flexed my fingers, took a breath, and typed. One command, then 2, then a pause. Not showmanship. Precision. 6 lines of code. I hit enter. 6 seconds. That's all it took. At 2:16 p.m., the signal went out across every satellite office, every distribution server, every international node. Next-Gen Core ceased to exist. Not crashed, frozen, locked at the root level. Timeouts cascaded across continents. At Summit HQ, I imagined Sophia panicking, phone in one hand, lawyers in the other, desperately trying to understand why backups weren't working, why redundancy failed. Because what they didn't know, I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd moved it. 2 weeks ago, under routine maintenance they'd assumed was a patch, I'd executed silent data migration, complete clone with encryption and key splitting. That clone now lived on Alpine's private servers. What Summit was left with was a hollow shell, gorgeous outside, rotted underneath. My phone rang at 3:45 p.m. Patricia Caldwell. Calvin, she began, voice strained. We have a situation. I listened to her scramble, offering consulting fees, equity restoration, anything to get me back. When she finished, I said simply, Patricia, I'm not your employee. I don't owe you anything. But you built this? Don't you care that it's falling apart? I care that it's finally free of people who didn't deserve it. 6 months later, I walked back through Summit's glass doors. Only now the sign read, Alpine Global Systems. Inside the lobby, framed behind the reception desk, was a portrait of me pointing at a whiteboard. Below it, Calvin Hartwell, architect of the future. Tony approached me in the hallway, now interim CEO after Patricia's resignation. Save it, Tony. You made your choice. I walked to my new office overlooking the mountains. Senior VP of Engineering and Infrastructure, 3% equity, direct report to the board. On my desk sat that same brass pen from my 15th anniversary engraved, to those who build quietly. I signed Alpine's latest patent filing, then whispered to myself, you fired a name, you forgot the mind. Some people shout to show power. I prefer to build.